Well, thank you so much, Keith. We're so glad to be here on The Next Right Thing. I am Debbie Georgianni with Adam Blai. We are the co-hosts of The Spirit World, heard right here on Guadalupe Radio Network on Saturdays, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. And Adam, we really wanted to cover some more entertainment pieces because this whole week is all about entertainment, and we wanted to give the good, the bad, and the ugly of everything that goes on, and that's important for us to make good decisions whether we enter in and use our time, and if it's being used wisely to consume these types of things on the big screen or on TV or even on apps even. So we're talking today, Adam, about how movies and TV have a bigger impact than we really know, than we really think. So why don't you start and I'll jump in.
Sure, Deb. So it's a bit of a soapbox topic for me. I really feel strongly about this, and that is because I have seen over the years the direct impact of movies and television on individual lives, specifically cases that have been, I've just seen lives really negatively affected. And what do I mean by that? So for us old folks now, TV and movies was certainly an impact on culture. We know that in terms of the history. Different films about different social themes and all of that has had a big impact. But in the spiritual realm, in our spiritual lives, it also has a big impact. One of the differences is as we become less of a kind of baked-in Christian culture with Christian assumptions and basic Christian theology baked into most of our culture, as that is going away to some extent as people become less religious, the culture isn't passing on the spiritual lessons that it used to. And within the family, people are not passing on the spiritual lessons. And because people still have a natural hunger for spiritual experiences and for spiritual information, they're not going to church, they're not hearing it from their relatives, so they're getting it through TV and movies. And it's part of human nature. If it's on a screen, to a certain extent, we turn off our judgment and rational thinking and just take it in. So it's a powerful medium. And in the last generation or two, things are different because the culture is no longer providing the foundation of the spiritual life and theology. So we can see examples of this. If we go back to the original Exorcist movie, it had a huge impact on culture in terms of reviving an interest in exorcism and generally scaring people really severely. It's still a scary movie, but it had a big impact, and it was a church-affirming movie to a large extent. The story was about priests who, did acts of self-sacrifice, that heroically fought to try to help this little girl. And in the end, of course, God wins, the church wins, there's a great sacrifice, but in the end, it's essentially a good ending. Father Karras regains some of his lost faith, if I'm remembering right, the younger psychiatrist priest. So that, to a certain extent, had a good impact in the sense of it reaffirmed that the spiritual life is real. And what I mean by good is, similar to the Gospels, Jesus did exorcisms, they were signs for the people. Okay. Now, as we move on into, the 70s and then moving into the 80s, we see somewhat darker things going on. But let's get to our generation. And that is this. About 15 years ago, it was not trendy to be a ghost hunter. It didn't really exist as a cultural thing. And we had a first of our paranormal TV shows. And it was the only one at the time. If you can imagine that, there's a billion of them now. It was the only one, and people didn't know if it was going to work out, and it was seen as kind of a weird thing. But of course, it took off. Now, I know the people that made a lot of the shows in the earlier days. And that's because I would be asked to go and speak at the paranormal conferences that were put on often by the stars of these shows, or the stars of these shows would be speakers at them and make appearances and whatnot. So here's the problem, Deb. Ghost hunting basically says, here's the world where, spirits are neutral, they're not harmful, they're basically just people, and they're interested in communication, and they do these little manifestations that we get very excited about, like knocking on a wall, like, we've talked about this before, the famous Fox sisters hoaxing their parents that started the spiritualism craze in the late 1800s. Simple things of knocking on walls, maybe a door moving, maybe a voice on a digital recorder. Okay. The ghost hunting world is that all of that is basically harmless. It might be as dramatic as something a little being thrown at you, and bumps you or something like that. Or maybe somebody feels a pinch or something that usually is about as extreme as it used to go. Now, the great danger in that from a Christian perspective, which of course is not communicated, is that from a Christian perspective, it's literally necromancy, which is calling up the dead to talk to them, which is strongly forbidden in the Bible. And it's strongly forbidden by the church. Why is that? Well, because if you call up the dead to talk to them, you're basically calling on a created spirit for your comfort, information, or power about your spiritual life. And if you do that, you're violating the first commandment. And it's not your grandmother, it's not your guardian angel, it's not your totem animal. It's a demon pretending to be those things, because nothing good is going to participate with you in a sin that the Bible says God finds abhorrent. So ghost hunting sterilizes the whole thing and basically makes it a neutral exercise where you can go out and get proof of the spiritual world in a harmless way with digital recorders. What they don't tell you in the TV shows is the impact on the people's lives. How many people's lives have been seriously damaged, marriages have been broken up, homes have become demonically infested where people had to move. And we've talked about before, Deb, very sadly, Mark and Debbie Constantino died through a murder-suicide, and they were the biggest experts on EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, basically in the U.S. TV market. So I've seen a big impact with this, and I've seen a lot of cases of ghost hunters coming to the church and asking for help, because they go out there, they play around with this stuff, and next thing they know, things are happening in their home, and then it starts getting out of control, and it starts getting dangerous, and they start getting scared, and then they call us and they say, come over here and get rid of this problem. And of course, a big part of it is educating them. And in every single case I've been involved in, the ghost hunting gear is in a garbage bag and it's out the door, and they don't want any part of it because their life has become a nightmare. But that part doesn't make it to the TV screen because that doesn't sell advertising spaces to make money. And Hollywood is there to make money. That's what these companies are there to do. So that's one of the trends that I see that is particularly problematic. Now, here's where it gets another layer, Deb. But before I move on to this next layer, do you have any thoughts so far? Have you noticed anything or any impact of TV or movies?
It's interesting what you're saying, though, because as you're describing this, I'm thinking about all the people that I come in contact with that casually make the comments that this is, really harmless entertainment. It's stuff that it really draws people in, keeps their attention, that gets their mind off of what's going on in the real world, gives them something a little heightened adrenaline rush, as after dinner and watching TV. So I'm thinking about all those people that are sitting in front of the TV set after dinner, after a long day's work. The kids are probably doing homework, maybe at the kitchen table or somewhere nearby, and they turn on these shows, and they're everywhere on the cable lineup. They are everywhere. I've said this many times on the Spirit World and also on Take Two that I channel surfed, and I was shocked at how many paranormal, ghost hunting, all these things are on there, and in half-hour segments, hour segments. So that's what I was thinking about as you were speaking. So I'm curious as to what you're going to say about how people are justifying why they are watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for a lot of people, it's like watching a horror movie, and they like the feeling of being scared, but it's got the reality TV element where it may or may not be real, may or may not be faked or exaggerated, but it has that extra anticipation of what's going to happen next, as if it's as if they were right there and they're watching this unfold.
Right. But Adam, wait a minute. You just said something very powerful there. And also, let me add that a lot of these shows have very well known celebrities that have endorsed these or have been they're the moderators, or they're the ones that are in the actual program and part of the ghost hunting experience. So you have that relatable, character that people know and they've trusted from other movies and other TV shows. So you add that to the layer of this as well, because before it was kind of not really known people that were doing this, and really you didn't have that attachment. And I will tell you that now having celebrities putting their names to it adds another depth to it. So go ahead, Adam, pick up where you left off.
No, and that is a very good and valid point, Deb. Adding the celebrity layer for the fans of those celebrities makes it all the more impactful and seem all the more legitimate to them. And if these people are their heroes, so to speak, in various ways, it makes more of an impact. Okay, so we've seen that trend of the normalizing of ghost hunting, which is necromancy and divination, which of course are forbidden for Christians, but our cultural sense is that it's basically harmless, though, once in a while something scary happens. That's what it was years ago. There's a really kind of disturbing trend within the paranormal TV world that I see being paralleled in, to a certain extent, kind of the adult cartoon world that we've talked about before with these projects that have kind of demonic theology in the cartoons. But that is this. They no longer are so much always interested in ghosts and the spirit of so-and-so and communicating with dead people, but they're now explicitly wanting demonic manifestations. As exorcism and the demonic has become a little bit normalized by the various exorcists with permission from their bishops giving more interviews, people are actually looking for demonic infestations and demonic manifestations, looking for being scratched as something that's exciting to have in the TV show, talking about becoming partially possessed or possessed for a period of time while they're being filmed, as if this is a good thing that's, super exciting and scary and edgy. It's really disturbing, Deb, because I work in a world where I know this stuff is real. I see it every week. And so it's very different for me. And, as I said, I know some of these celebrities, and I know about them from the celebrities that the ones I don't know personally, I know about them through the grapevine. Sometimes they really are wanting this. They really are looking for demonic manifestations. Others are just doing this to make a paycheck. Sure, some of it's probably staged and made up. Absolutely. But some of them are very serious about it in terms of looking for the demonic. And I find that very disturbing. And I think it's indicative of where our culture is going in general. As we become less Christian and we become more non-religious, the hunger for spiritual experiences continues. And that's a yearning for God that's built into us. But the devil is basically stepping up and offering the spiritual experiences from him to the people that don't know about the process of seeking God in terms of the long distance process of it, the long process of it. I'm not talking about I'm spiritual but not religious, and I just kind of feel good about myself and tell myself I'm a good person and call that spirituality, but the actual work of the journey of conversion towards God, which Western civilization knows well. There's a shortcut that the devil offers, and that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make here. The devil offers a shortcut to spiritual experiences without all the work. All you have to do is invite him in. All you have to do is say yes and give him an opening, and you will likely get spiritual experiences, but you're not going to like them. It's not going to be something positive. And once you let him in, he doesn't leave. And generally, it's just going to get worse, and definitely sooner or later it's going to get worse. He may play along with you for a little while, but it's going to turn ugly. And I've seen so many cases related to all of this, and it bleeds over into, we don't have time for this on this focused topic, bleeds over into Wicca, it bleeds over into Satanism becoming normalized. And there's a parallel that Hollywood is offering, which is a demonic theology that says Satan is basically the misunderstood hero. And so there's two things now being offered, and that is you can play around with demons, and secondly, demons aren't so bad. And all of this is happening within TV and movies.
Right. Right. But let me just ask you this question. So we're not going to have time today. So tomorrow maybe we can pick up and do like the animated series that's out there on video, and even the lighter kind of entertainment stuff like the older series like Ghostbusters, and it was mentioned Scooby-Doo and other things that were kind of seemed very harmless. But there's those shows and those movies seem so funny. It really couldn't lead you into anything. So let's talk about that probably tomorrow, if indeed that is the beginning steps of being interested in something like this and getting that adrenaline surge, right, and wanting more and more. And now you go into the reality TV where you're taking on these quote unquote somewhat serious investigations when they're going undercover trying to find the paranormal and all that kind of stuff and make connection. And now you think you're part of some virtual investigative team watching this from the outside. I mean, how dangerous, how many steps are you going closer to and closer to opening that door to letting those demons in? And now, like you said, once they feel welcome, they come in and they don't leave. And so that's an important aspect we need to talk about. At what point do people cross the line from looking at something just as for funny entertainment or just enjoyable evening, and now they are actually, slightly cracking that door open? So think about that for tomorrow, Adam, but finish up the final thoughts about what you wanted to share with us today about this topic.
Well, I want to wrap up with the positive. So given that this is a situation for the young parents or even, middle-aged parents that their kids maybe aren't fully grown yet, my point is that we need to catechize, we need to remember the faith, we need to pass on the lessons, the hard-learned lessons that both Jesus demonstrated and explained to us, that the Old Testament explains to us. We need to pick these things back up because we're entering a very reckless and dark time in terms of our culture for most people, because if this goes much further, it's going to be beyond normalized, and it's going to be twisted into something that's good and laudable. And the solution to this is, of course, prayer, to pray for people, to pray for your loved ones, to pray for your children, but you've got to educate them. And that's part of the power, I think, of Catholic media, where we have an opportunity to put recordings out there where somebody somewhere will be listening to this. Maybe it'll be at the right moment before they get too deep in the deep end of the pool and get into trouble. But you need to do it with your own family. You need to do it face to face. And you need to get educated on your faith if you've forgotten.
So what you're saying is get well formed in the faith so that you can make good choices and protect your family. I love that. That's it for the next right thing for today. We'll be back tomorrow talking kind of like a part 2 on the other series out there, all sorts of them, in the animated series, the new one on Amazon Prime, and all these things. We'll talk about how dangerous they really are. But that's for tomorrow. Right now, we're sending it back to you, Keith.